Next I have Chain of Gold. This is my first time returning to the Shadowhunters world after reading the Dark Artifices trilogy? No. Sorry, I had to check on that. The Infernal Devices trilogy. So I have read all of the Infernal Devices trilogy, loved them. I've read the first book in the Mortal Instruments, the original series. It was okay. I wasn't compelled to finish it. I prefer the historical setting more. In this book, we return to another historical setting. It's a sequel series to the Infernal Devices trilogy. And it's set 1902, 1904, something like that. There are so many characters in this book. They don't seem repetitive, but that's only because not a lot of them are fully developed. There's hints of it, and what you do see there you enjoy. They don't fall into standard tropes or anything like that. So I do appreciate that. I understand that she needs this number of characters because she does have a penchant for getting things super close to incest. She has these two prominent families, the Carstairs and the Herondales, which when you go back to the original series, the female protagonist was a Carstairs, the male protagonist was a Herondale. And all of these series involve characters with that name. And yes, I get that you can have the same name and not be super closely related, but you think about the world and the fact that they're so closely tied even in the prequel series. Setting that aside, this book took a while to get going. I knew there was nothing bad about it. It wasn't super boring. It felt like it was opening up the world again. It was laying the groundwork for the series. I don't think the next books will be slow. They're still huge. The next book is 100 pages longer. I read it. It was fine. I wasn't compelled to pick it up, especially when I was reading a really compelling audiobook, Firekeeper's Daughter, at the same time. When things did start to get going, things were falling into place, things seemed to make a lot of sense, but we did tend to repeat the same things in the plot. And I think that's because it's so big. The things repeated weren't the same. They were different, but they were the same type of event until we get to the final confrontation. Cassandra Clare did not disguise the human villain of this book. And I picked that out way before the epilogue. I am interested in seeing what she does with Grace's character because I thought I had her figured out, but I kind of don't. And I wonder if that's either because Cassandra Clare is unsure about her or because she has plans for her going on. I'm also bothered by the person that they chose to be the model for this because Cordelia is not white. So if we look at this, which is in this is a special edition, but I got it from the library. We know that this is Cordelia and this is Alistair because it's described that he had dyed his hair blonde. And I'm like, okay, that's who they are. But you look at this figure right here, who in my opinion matches the description in the book. And then you look at what's on the front. No, that's not what's there. That's a petty thing. That's not a Cassandra Clare thing. That is an editorial decision. But I wanted to call that out because I see it there. Next, I'm going to talk about 3 books for which I do not have the physical copy, but that I read this month. The first of those is one that I read as an ebook, and that is Iron Widow. I'll say this at the outset. I was not the reader for this book. This was not the book for me. I've enjoyed some sci-fi. I've enjoyed some dystopian. I used to be a huge dystopian fan, and this book kind of falls in that category. And in this setup, humanity is training up fighters to continually go out and fight against what they see as this invading force, trying to take away their land, their humanity. They're ravaging what's left of Earth. To do that, what they do is they inhabit, the pilots inhabit this, I'm already forgetting what the machine is called, but these machines that the humans use are actually taken from the husks of the alien invaders. Yeah, that's a little disturbing. But they're taken from that and they're powered by, it's spelled QI, and I think it's chi, which is like life force. But it's not just one pilot. There's always a male and a female pilot, a yin and a yang. Unfortunately, it has been a thing that the male pilots are the ones actually considered the pilot, and the female pilots usually don't have much option in that. They will sign up, they'll enlist for money to go back to their family. But that's because most of them end up dying because the fight takes more of their life force from them than the pilot. The main character decides to enlist. Apparently, only thing keeping her from being beautiful enough, which is like, why does that have anything to do with life force, is a unibrow. And so she gets this rich guy that she has a crush on, likes, to trim the unibrow, and oh, she's pretty. Okay. It's also based on a lot of Asian traditions, and she's also had to endure the practice of foot binding. I didn't necessarily like that because it's just the idea of all of these backward ideas and thoughts and notions about women have been put back on these women as if nothing has changed. It didn't strike me as necessarily believable that that would happen again. Putting that aside. So she actually enlists. She detests the system. But she enlists because her older sister was killed. Not in battle. If she had died in battle, their family would have gotten a good price for that consolation prize. No, the pilot that she was linked with just flat out killed her. So they don't get anything for that. And of course, he doesn't get reprimanded at all. So she enlists for the purpose of exacting her revenge on him. And she wants to kill him. And obviously, she's not thinking of killing him in the machine because it's never happened before that a woman has survived and the man has not. But while she's attempting to kill him, and he's also attempting to rape her, they're summoned into battle. Suffice it to say, she emerges, and she's now an Iron Widow, meaning the male pilot died. This has never happened before. People don't like that. If it's a very misogynistic society, which it is, she's punished for it. And so that's the setup for the book. And it sounds really intriguing and like something could be done with it. And I don't think that the author did a bad job with it. I think she developed the characters really well. I think she developed a compelling plot line. The reveal at the end, I did sort of predict. I thought it was realistic. I just didn't jive with the book. Something about it just felt like I was experiencing it and it was flowing over me and not sinking in. That's what the book felt like to me. I ultimately ended up giving that one, after the call pile, a 3.5, which I guess that fits. The next two books I read as audiobooks. As soon as I finished this book, Firekeeper's Daughter, and it was literally right before I went to bed, I went on bookshop.org and ordered it. Because number one, the cover's gorgeous. Even if I hadn't loved it as much as I absolutely do, I would have wanted to purchase it. This book, so right now in January, or by the time you see this, February, I have two favorite books. I have one all-time favorite nonfiction, one all-time favorite fiction for this year. This book engaged me in a way that not very many books do. Angeline Boulley wrote with such authenticity that you couldn't help but inhabit the characters. You're just living that life with very real difficulties, and it's not like it's this thriller or unusual murder mystery or etc. It's a very real crack epidemic. I remember being about the same age as Donis when these things were happening. And I'm looking at this, and so much of what I consumed in media, in news, in books, it dealt with the tragedy of the crack epidemic. So to set it there made so much sense. But she also, Angeline Boulley, spoke from a place of authenticity as far as the culture. The Ojibwe culture the way that Daunis felt conflicted between her two identities, it fully grabbed me. And even when the plot was slow, it took a little while to get started, but I didn't mind that because it felt so real. It wasn't campy or put on as far as the YA part of it. And then there was it felt like a little lull in the middle, but honestly, I really think that's because I was listening to it as an audiobook, and so I was consuming it slower than I would if I read it on the page. But when you get to the end, the pace that she had in the part that I thought was slow made so much sense. And when things really got going, I don't think it's a very big number of books that have made me tear up. This one made me tear up. Not in a bad way, not because something sad was happening, but because it was just so not wholesome, because it wasn't a great situation when this was happening. It was like family, like found family coming together and supporting and someone having someone else's back. And that just, it hit me right here. I will be really surprised if another book hits me the same way that this one does, but I would love for that to happen. The next audiobook that I read is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I have wanted to read this for a long time. It's one of the last Romanian books that I had on my TBR, that I put on my TBR back in 2012. I have always really admired her way with words, her storytelling ability, but that's just what I had seen of her in public appearances. I think this was the first of her work that I've read, and I didn't know quite what to expect. So this is the first of her memoirs, and she talks about the time from some of her earliest memories when she and her brother were sent south to live with their grandmother, their father's mother, in Arkansas as very young children. And it goes from that time up until she was 16 and had her own son. I will say, I don't think she's the greatest audiobook narrator. I enjoy her voice, but it felt a little bit stilted at times. And if I hadn't sped it up, she would have read so slowly. I ended up reading this at 2 times speed, actually maybe a little faster, and it felt like normal conversation. The way that she tells stories, you can see those images. You can see what these different people look like in her life. You can feel the emotions that she felt, that she ascribed to the other people. I thought she did an amazing job. And part of me thinks, how can she remember all of those details from way back when? And I know that part of it, is she going to remember the exact words necessarily? No. But I also live with a man, my grandpa, who at 93 can remember things from 50, 60 years ago vividly. There are certain people who have that ability. It also made me think about a lot of the things that are going on now with how people are looking at so-called critical race theory and wanting to ban books. And because I had heard a podcast that was talking about Jerry Craft's New Kid, which is on my TBR, my very long list TBR, how some parents had gotten upset about this book, which is primarily a fictionalized autobiographical story of Jerry Craft. He's changed a few things in there, but when he wrote and illustrated this graphic novel, he's telling his story. And yet some parents got it banned because it made white kids feel bad. And I thought, one of the things that I am most grateful for is all of this literature that I have had the opportunity to read, that is this personal experience and telling from those authors about their stories. And that has opened my mind so much. And I thought about Maya Angelou's memoir. I thought about that as I was listening to it. And I thought about how many of these people trying to get these things banned would object to that because it makes people feel bad. You don't have the right To say that someone else's story makes you feel bad so they can't tell their story. It's not right. It's one of the things that I thought about while listening to her story, because she tells about a lot of things that occurred to her at a time when things were overtly racist. Really quickly, to finish out the month, I am picking up on my read through of the Harry Potter books on audiobook through my library. My cousin and I, when we went down to Orlando, on the drive down, we listened to the first, the second, and a smidgen of the third. And so I'm picking back up on my read of those. I won't go into a wrap up or my thoughts about it or anything like that, because I have read them so many times. So to finish my January wrap up, I am going to talk about the last 3 books that I read in the month. First of those 3, we have Daughter of the Deep. I finally got to read this and I loved it. So my whole thing with the Goodreads Choice Awards, it really had nothing to do with the book itself, because I have read a lot of Rick Riordan's books before and I know that I love them, and I have heard from other people on BookTube that this is a good book. I'll set that aside for now. The book itself, I really enjoyed. It is a definite departure from Riordan's typical style, at least what I've read of him, and it is not based in some sort of fantasy world, urban, I guess you would call it urban fantasy, where the myth retellings. This is sci-fi, and it ties into literary, historical literary things with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. A lot of people call it a retelling. That would be like calling the Percy Jackson series a retelling of the Greek myths. Percy Jackson's not retelling the myth of Perseus. It's a continuation of the story. It's a reimagining of if these things were actually real. It's taking a myth and making it real. And that's what Riordan does in this book with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This is the first female protagonist that I have read in any of his books, and I really enjoyed it. I thought he did a really good job. Anna is a fascinating character. I really enjoyed hearing her thoughts, because this is first person. That's Riordan's typical modus operandi. The way that she explored her own heritage, dealing with her parents' deaths, dealing with her relationship with her brother, and then her connection to the main character, Captain Nemo in, well, he's Prince Dakar, but Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I thought it was fascinating. I also loved her best friend, Esther, and the relationship, the representation of neurodivergence with Esther, because he didn't make Esther a stereotypical character or a lovable oddball. Esther had different ways that her brain reacted, and it felt natural and also very unique to Esther. And this whole book read a whole lot more mature than the Percy Jackson books and the Heroes of Olympus books. Not that I didn't like those, but this to me actually read almost like young adult. It didn't have a lot of the middle grade tone that I normally get when I read middle grade. I really think that with Anna at the outset of this series being a freshman in high school, that I don't think this fits in the middle grades genre. Now, Percy Jackson, when it starts off, he's in middle school, so that fits. He also has that maturity level. I think this will still be considered middle grade, but I just think that Riordan did a really good job with the things that he talked about in here. I also loved the animals, the named characters that were animals, like Sophocles, the dolphin, and Jupiter, I think he's an orangutan. I thought this was really good, and honestly, I can't remember what I rated it. I think I rated it a 4.5. Definitely a really good outing. And I have checked out a whole lot more of Rick Riordan's backlist that I haven't read in between Heroes of Olympus and Daughter of the Deep, because, quick side tangent, I didn't really get into the Asgard series, so the Magnus Chase, so I read the first one of those and I was like, and didn't read a lot in between. Those will probably pop up in February. The next to last book that I read in January, Chain of Iron. This definitely benefited from not being read at the same time as another amazing book. So when I read Chain of Gold, I was also listening to Firekeeper's Daughter, which right now is my #1 book for the year, or #1 fiction book for the year. So Chain of Gold did not match up to Firekeeper's Daughter, and so my enjoyment of it went down a little bit. I still really enjoyed it. I really enjoy the Shadowhunter Chronicles, especially the historical parts. Another part that brought down Chain of Gold that did not bring down Chain of Iron is getting back into the world and establishing this new generation of Shadowhunters. That took about 100, 150 pages of Chain of Gold. You don't have this. You jump in about 4 months, I think, after the end of Chain of Gold. So I thought that all of the characterization in here is absolutely excellent. I really, really enjoyed the development of the characters that we got. The development of Cordelia and James and Matthew. I wanted more of Lucy, but the direction that Lucy's character is going fits what I think of Lucy in my mind. I watched a vlog of a booktuber that I follow when she read through this. I guess I don't know what's different about me. Maybe it was because I skipped ahead, jumped ahead. I'm like trying to find things out, but I didn't like read consistently. I would just like flip a few pages more. I knew who the demon behind all the things was because I thought that was pretty well established in Chain of Gold. I also was fairly certain that it wasn't James, although that was a fascinating thing to throw in there. I was fairly certain I knew who it was. Now, I'm not going to say, but I was fairly certain I knew who it was, and it made sense to me. And even with me thinking that I knew who it was, it didn't diminish my enjoyment of this. Now, I like marathoned this book on Sunday afternoon, the last Sunday of January, because I needed to get this in January, and I just like dove into this world like head first, and it just felt so immersive, and I really appreciated the characters and the way that the plot flowed. To me, this plot did not have the lulls that Chain of Gold did. Really, Cassandra Clare, the way that she ends this book, I'm just glad that I didn't start reading this until closer to the time that the conclusion to this series came out, because seriously, the way she ends this book. Obviously, I'm not going to say, but I really enjoyed this book a whole lot more than I thought I would. I believe that I rated this a 4.5 stars as well. The last book that I read in January is the screenplay of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So before I talk about the book itself, when I took the dust jacket off to read it, I love, and obviously the camera's not going to pick up the feel of the book, but it just feels so good in the hand, and there's a niffler on the front. I have enjoyed both of the Fantastic Beasts so far, and I know that I will enjoy the third one coming up. When I saw that there was a screenplay of it, obviously I put it on my wish list because I love this world. I love the wizarding world. I mean, it got me back into there a little bit, but it's a screenplay. It's a screenplay, and it's not immersive like a novel. I feel the same way reading plays. Like when I took Shakespeare back in grad school, I would read the plays and they're fine, but it's nothing to watching the plays on stage or watching these movies. Like, give me a novel version of this, please. That's what I would love, and that's what I felt was missing. This was fine. It was a quick read. I needed one more book for the month to meet my goal. So I picked this one up and read it. I honestly don't remember what I rated it. Maybe a 4-star, but a very low 4-star, just because I wanted the immersive nature of novel and not a screenplay. I probably will feel the same way about Crimes of Grindelwald because I do have that screenplay as well. And I also plan to buy the screenplay of The Secrets of Dumbledore when that one comes out. But this is how I finished my reading journey in January. I had no idea how I was going to finish that sentence as I held up the book like this. So that concludes my, I almost said reading vlog. That concludes my wrap up for January. In January, I read 21 books and I'm really excited about it. I'm not going to talk about any statistics in this video because I have a completely separate video, which I will link either in the description or in the cards. So please go check that out. I'm really excited about my reading journey this year because I'm finding a lot of really good books and I am enjoying them even more because I'm talking about them and I'm discussing them. So I would love to discuss more about these books with you in the comments. So subscribe if you want to comment, please give it a thumbs up and I'll see you in the next one.